All right. Hello and welcome back to the Pop Marketing Podcast. Still your host, Joe Cox. Each episode, myself and a guest chatted up about brand marketing and its relationship with popular culture. Brace yourself today, folks, with our interview with Ian Baer, the founder and chief soothsayer. I love that at Sooth. I guess picture a marketer who's not just playing the game, but reinventing it now. Been inside
Oh,
of it, and now
gosh, for trying. Thank you.
that's right. We all are. So with over 30 years in the biz, Ian believes that modern marketing is kind of that alchemy between big data and being human, which I love kind of getting into and understanding more about Sooth, which we will talk about. And speaking of that, enter Sooth, your brainchild, beacon in marketing science. I guess think emotional connections dialed up to like 4 times performance boost. That mix of performance and emotion and what it is like to be human and the chaos there.
Yeah.
Ian's not just about numbers; he's about stories that stir our soul, feed our need to connect, to fit in, to improve ourselves, just feel safe. He's transformed e-commerce for fashion icons. That's cool. Boosted tech brands to stellar heights. Reinvented entire dining experiences. Been there. That's always fun. And his secret, tapping into what makes us human. A speaker, a thinker, modern marketer, Ian Baer. Welcome to the Pop Marketing Podcast. That is your intro for the entire holiday season.
Good Lord. Yeah. What do I do with that other than say thank you? What a gracious introduction, and I'm so happy to be here. We're gonna have fun.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking time out. We haven't reached where I don't like to play the we're in an imaginary time. Right now, we are just before the holidays get going. But when everybody listens to this, it's going to be magically, we're going to be into rolling into 2024 already. So if we speak a little about, having to travel or about being busy during holiday season, that's why.
Right.
So let's get it started like I do with most.
Let's do our best, though, to speak as if we're in the future
I
and speak
mean,
of
yeah,
Christmas as being
2020.
in the past.
That's right. And how amazing, an
Oh my
amazing
God,
little break
I
it was.
looked so amazing on Christmas.
Oh, it's good to see everyone. And I couldn't
Yeah.
be happier with my guests. So, like many guests that I have here, through your career, you've been focused inside advertising, sure, but it's still been pretty squiggly. And when I say squiggly, it's like been within those bounds of digital and strategy and creative and kind of that dance with every part of the agency. Uh,
Yeah,
you
I
know,
like to say the reason I got out of the agency business is because I did every job you can do in the agency business.
yeah, the
I was
check.
an
It's
account
very
guy.
check.
I was a chief creative officer. I was the chief strategy officer. I started a couple of agencies, so it was time to help advertising from the outside.
Well, great. Well, tell us the origin story a little bit. Get into it just a little bit. I always love a great origin story. So, you're overlooking your place there in Manhattan. I think you've been in New York your entire life. So,
Most of it. I did about a 10-year foray to the Midwest and the West Coast, but I've been back in New York full time for about 20 years.
great. So, how does a kid from
Brooklyn,
from Brooklyn
yes.
and
Speaking
yes,
of
I
the
love
edge,
it. That's
yeah.
killer. I was a kid from Brooklyn, end up in the advertising world, and then outside supporting it now too.
Wow. Well, okay. How do I condense this? Let's go for it. So, grew up knowing I wanted to do one of three things. I either wanted to catch for the Yankees, like my idol Thurman Munson. Um, I wanted to make people laugh, like my idol John Belushi. Both of them tragically passed away very young. Or I wanted to write the daily newspaper column that gave everyone perspective, like my idol Jimmy Breslin. And I had an amazing opportunity a couple of weeks before I was set to graduate Fordham, with my journalism degree with a minor in social sciences. We'll get back to where that comes into today's reality. And I had an opportunity to meet Jimmy Breslin. And not only to meet the dude, but like to have breakfast with him in his apartment.
Wow.
Bizarre set of circumstances brought me there. Story for another day and a couple of bourbons, but got to meet Jimmy. And here I feel like I'm going to get that final dose of inspiration to propel my journalism career. And Jimmy Breslin, prescient as he was in 1987, pre-internet,
when things were great, things were going great. Yeah, for the newspaper world, like this is good. Gosh. This is a great time.
And Jimmy Breslin looks me in the eye and says, "Don't go into this business. The news isn't the news anymore. It's all run by giant corporations. You're way too earnest. You should do something else before this business turns you into a bitter old man."
Wow.
And I'm 20 years old, and my idol just told me I can't do the thing I've spent 4 years studying and honing my craft to do. So now, I decide to listen to Jimmy. So what am I going to do? Well, I can type 72 words a minute. So I'm looking through the New York Times at job listings. Where can I get in somewhere with the ability to type that doesn't look like it'll suck? And I see a bunch of ad agencies are hiring entry-level people. Back then they called us secretaries. And all you had to do was type 55 words a minute and you can get an interview. Sure enough, 3 agencies offered me jobs. The one that offered me the highest salary, which was $17,500 a year, nice. That's where I went. And I really didn't think it was going to be anything more than a fun summer job while I figured out what I wanted to do. And I spent 35 years in the agency business. I started as an account guy, rose through the ranks, and kind of Peter principle, right? When you just keep getting promoted as an account guy and they run out of new things to do with you, they make you agency president. So I was president of 3 different agencies, loved leading people, but the whole sales part of the job and the, having to manage a P&L and stuff like that didn't exactly light my fire.
Yeah.
The thing that always did light my fire was solving people's problems. From the day I started, and telling people stories and understanding what people needed, because I still had these fires burning inside me as a journalist and as a social scientist with all the sociology and psychology and social psych classes that I took. So when I saw this emerging area of strategy, which didn't exist as a practice in the agency business when I started, did a big career pivot right around the start of the millennium, went all in on strategy, was chief strategy officer of a few agencies. Along the way, one of those agencies asked me to be chief creative officer, which a role I did for 7 years. Always wanted, I love the Wayne Gretzky quote about, he always said he was better than everyone else because everyone else was skating to where the puck is, and he was skating to where the puck was going to be. And I always felt like the only way I'm going to remain relevant in a business that doesn't love age and gray hair and experience and wisdom is to be actually out ahead of people who were maybe a lot younger than me. So I made a very early move to digital in the 90s. I went hard into social in 2006, was part of starting one of the first pure play social media agencies, a shop called Big Fuel. Then spent a dozen years helping build an agency to become the largest woman-owned agency in the U.S. I was extremely proud of that. We eventually became part of the holding company world, as those things go, spent a couple of years at Publicis. And when I exited about a year and a half ago, I wanted to do something that would be more of a legacy. And I wanted to find a way to take this practice that I had uniquely developed out of my skills in journalism and social sciences to interpret the emotional needs of audiences in a way that could actually make marketers and brands disproportionately successful, but also wouldn't rot my soul because I didn't feel like a mercenary. I always felt like I was helping people. I don't feel like I've ever done anything in marketing to coerce somebody to do something that wouldn't ultimately be good for them. So that's really what Sooth is all about now, is codifying that as a repeatable practice where we can actually help brands understand what people need from them emotionally and match make those emotions to content and experiences that the brands can provide. There's
Man,
a
well done.
nutshell of my
Well
entire,
done.
yeah.
That's an origin story, and led us right back. I mean, led us to where we needed to get to, which is Soothe. But I want you to dig in a little bit more to Soothe, just because, and then it's not. It's really extremely interesting anytime we're trying to marry the chaos of human emotion and what it is to be a human, the messiest,
Yeah.
of
Oh, it
that, the
is.
unlogical, pushes of emotions on our buttons with the organization and tidiness of big data and
Right.
of
And
insights that come from
ROIs.
that. Oh, love it. We take ourselves really seriously because there's a lot of money involved. There is a lot of money. Now, a good jingle is still pretty awesome, and people, and people call it what it is: fame. Brands want fame to be famous and popular.
But what does a
But
good jingle generally do? It makes you feel something.
absolutely, it's
I
that
just saw
little
somebody,
and
a
remember.
buddy of mine, posted on LinkedIn. He did a post on like his 20 favorite ad campaigns of all time, at the end of the year. And at the top of the list, he put the Coke, I'd love to teach the world to sing ad, which was, re-immortalized in the series Mad Men. Well, I've been at this long enough. I worked with the dude who wrote that jingle.
Whew, I
Bill
mean,
Backer. I actually
iconic.
got to work with him in the 1980s when I was just starting out in the business, or the very early 90s, and he was at the end of his career. Um, and what did that do? That song just made people feel something about soda that they'd never felt in their entire life. That a bottle of soda could somehow make you feel connected to people in the world that you couldn't understand any other way. Well, that's exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, it's exactly, and I like the fact too. It came from a copywriter. I guess would have thought they'd have hired out a songwriter or something.
There was a songwriter. I think there was actually a source song in terms of the tune that was not very well known.
Yeah,
And then Bill Backer, who, a Hall of Fame advertising creative, um, wrote new lyrics for it on behalf of Coke.
super cool. And so when it comes to Soothe and creating something new, and at this part of your career, bringing something new to life, which is super exciting, being that you've seen everything inside the advertising world and seen a lot of stuff inside the brand world just because you've worked so closely with so many different brands. So
Yeah.
what was missing? What really was, because bringing something new to life is not an easy task or a flippant task, right? It's just
Well, I think
bringing on.
timing is everything.
Yes.
I spent years trying to help clients understand, and many did, and we had extraordinary success together, but I spent years trying to help clients understand that there is real power in connecting with people on an emotional level, in treating them not like consumers, a word I don't really like, but in treating them as audiences, in treating them as the same way you would in any other form of entertainment or popular culture. Understanding these are people with needs and expectations, and if you actually meet those needs and expectations, they're going to want more from you. They're going to love you. They're going to tell their friends. And the clients with whom I've had the greatest success over the decades, the ones where we've had outsized, crazy growth, like building businesses that grow 70% year over year for 8 years, as I just did with a major athletic brand in my last agency role. That all comes out of that different level of emotional understanding. The challenge is, for many of the clients I've said that to over the years, the response will be, well, that sounds nice, but it also sounds warm and fuzzy, and I've got stuff to sell. Well, we've had something happen in the last few years, which is actually somehow marketing with all this data and all this technology and all the immediacy of the internet has lost effectiveness. Overall, Salesforce published a stat that said overall marketing is 23% less effective than it was 3 years ago. I mean, how is that possible? I saw Gartner published a stat that said about 3/4 of CMOs say they don't have sufficient budget to hit their goals. And all I could think when I read that was, it's not that you don't have enough money. It's that you have learned to settle for mediocre performance, for what should be unacceptable return on your marketing investment. And that just makes everybody miserable. So it gave me a moment to be able to go to people when there is now this powerful evidence that shows when you emotionally connect with someone to the point you raised earlier, that person's going to spend 4 times more with you. That person's almost twice as likely to recommend you to someone else. That person's going to stay an average of 2 years longer as a customer. Well, those numbers, even if you don't care about the warm and fuzzies, that gets a lot more people to engage in the conversation. And then when they're able to see the type of insights that we can derive by applying our own methodology to seemingly unemotional data, they're pretty shocked. The question we get asked most often is, how on earth do you know all this about my customers? It's borderline creepy, but I come in peace.
Yeah, the good stuff usually is. So,
Yeah.
and I'm
What's a
really
fine line between helpful and creepy, right? That's just a statement on life. That could be on a T-shirt.
That's right. And context too, of like in the room
Yeah,
of being a marketer or be working for a brand versus just somebody off the street, and how these things get done, and the amazing piece of how does anything get done when you see how hard it is to put all this money and effort and creative powerhouse behind a campaign or a marketing push. It's how important it is to get off to the right start and have the right insight
that's right.
and understand that deep human need. So
Yeah,
that is really, that's what we're still going for, whether we're on, yeah, we're inside of the brand, building that emotional kind of connection with a person, and then
and using
remembering.
empathy. There's such a difference between using data to manipulate a behavior out of someone, and I think when the term big data got popular, that's a lot of what that was referring to. And
Yeah.
even like, I find myself lately obsessed with some of the words that marketers get very comfortable using. Targeting and capturing and converting, and it all sounds so forceful and manipulative and kind of shady. It's that's the way comic book villains talk. And the truth is, data can be used to understand someone. Data can be used as an engine for empathy. And the whole inspiration for Sooth, literally woke up at 1:30 a.m., couldn't sleep, grabbed my phone, started furiously thumbing out notes on my phone because I had this idea for a way that we could use the same data that's available to everyone else by applying psychographic and attitudinal and emotional models to that data, derived just from behavior, what people are actually thinking and motivated by and what they need. and what would engender actual brand love. Um, and it's very doable. I've been able to, very thankfully, if I think about work that I've done where, like, in the world of mergers and acquisitions, sometimes you get two brands come together that should never be together from an emotional level because their customers want two very different things. I got to work with Alaska Airlines at the time they acquired Virgin America. I remember I was actually a loyal Virgin America flyer at the time. And I remember flying Virgin America and having a flight attendant pull me aside and say, "Hey, I just want you to know a lot of us are looking to leave before this merger is completed because those Alaska people, they're not like us. They're not cool." Somebody said, "I think they're owned by the Mormons." Like, they developed all these. But so
Yeah.
talk about two cultures you couldn't possibly get together. But working with my team, we were actually able to find emotional common
Yeah.
ground.
Find the thread. What is the thing that is in common? Even if it's like, where can we start?
That's
Right.
right. And as a result, for all the forecasts that our clients had about, how many members they might lose from their elite flyer group, uh, we actually greatly over delivered on their retention goals. I think we exceeded them by 70%. And it was all because we were able to find, actually, between the high flying, jet setting, bathed in purple light, Virgin America, too cool for the airport crowd, and the folksy family, you know, fresh baked cookies and local cheese Alaska thing coming out of Seattle, there was emotional common ground having to do with the way people were treated. And we were able to use that to the point where it was actually the most awarded and recognized frequent flyer program um, on 4 different platforms, from JD Power to the Points Guide to the Airline Passenger Experience Association. We're all human beings, so there's always common ground. You just got to work for it sometimes. So I think once we were able to make the business case for emotional connection, and thankfully, because there's AI that allows me to get more insight out of data in a couple of weeks than I used to be able to get in a couple of years, we really have something here. And it's been an amazing first year at Sooth.
That's awesome. I, I was thinking while you were discussing that about how in the past, even with as data would come in, it really came down to find that insight. We don't have a ton of time. We don't have the time and the budgets to be, but we can get there. We can always get there, but a lot of
Right.
times time either is not on our side and or the budget to find find the right
Well, and to your
path.
point, and we've both seen this, right? When budget decisions have to get made, and that literal or now digital red pen gets pulled out, what are the first 2 things that get cut from every budget? We don't have the time or the money for research, so we're not going to try to understand what people
We
want.
want to get to the
And the
making,
next
get
thing
to
they
the
cut is measurement.
yeah, yeah.
So we're not going to spend our money understanding what people need, or time, again, because that's always been a factor. And we're not going to invest money understanding what really worked and why it worked. We'll just keep playing the law of averages and repeating the same thing over and over again. There were years and years ago, at the beginning of my career, I worked with one of the largest credit card marketers. And I wanted to understand their strategy behind their credit card direct mail. And they said, "Oh, it's really simple. We take the same list of people, and every 5 weeks, we send those same people the same piece of mail." And I said, "Well, what's the logic behind that?" And they said, "Because one of the times they get that mail, they're really going to need that money. And then we've got it. There's a better way." And here we are. That was like 1993. I had that conversation with a client. So here we are, 30 years later. We should be a lot better at this.
That
That's
isn't
where I'm at
that the
now.
that is did it surprise you that the conversations that I was having 20 years ago, and I kind of rode my wave through social, just not the ending of digital, but like how digital grew into social, went
Mhm.
to that wave through my career.
Yeah,
And the same
really, that's Web one
conversations.
to Web two, right?
That's right. It was the Web 2, and now the ideas of Web 3, and you can
Yes,
kind of start to see AI
which
and
is
all
not
this come
AKA the
together.
metaverse, as everyone thought a couple of years ago.
Wow, that was a fun, a very quick wave that probably will come back around. But wow, that got. I
It will.
think
It just won't be what we thought.
it's not going to be called metaverse for sure.
No, I sure wouldn't.
That has been taken out. So with that, do you see? Was there frustration in your career? And I'm getting personal into mine. Was it a frustration in your career to have those same conversations 30 years later? And were we so off with how quickly we thought things would move, when we should have probably known that moving these giant gears was just gonna be it's gonna be a slow burn. But what, seeing all those conversations and still having them, why did it
Well,
take so long?
sometimes when I'm being really reflective, uh, I say that I probably could have made a lot more money in this business if I just played along. And a fortunate or unfortunate, depending on how you look at it, hallmark of my career is I've never been the one who played along. I've always been the one who said, we can do better than this. We can do better than this by our people. We can do better than this by the consumers. We can do better than this by the clients who are paying us millions of dollars to make them successful. Um, as one of my early mentors always used to remind me, in this business more than most, the urgent pushes out the important every day. And I think the more marketing has grown and the spotlight on CMOs within their organizations has gotten much hotter, and those tenures got very short for a while. And that pressure just pushed down. And everyone has just felt this enormous need to deliver today. Close that deal today. Get that client to do one more thing today. Push one more thing on those consumers than they're ready to buy today. Try to get them to spend a little more the next time they come in. Really losing sight of the long-term erosion that has on the trust among all of us in that food chain. The communities of clients and creators and consumers, you understand why it happens. But the net result has absolutely been an erosion of trust among all of us. And the way that trust gets rebuilt is by listening to each other. So I've never really allowed myself to get bitter. I've always been enough of a Pollyanna to feel that there's a better way, and you find like-minded people. And I've always been able to find like-minded clients. That's why I've had clients who I've had the good fortune to work with in 3 or 4 different agencies sometimes, because they understand that we're going for something different, because we like to feel good about ourselves, even though we are in a profession that a lot of people find very untrustworthy. So I think what's happening is there's a growing number of people. I think pandemic attitudes really have changed everyone's understanding. The way we are treating talent in the industry is improving. There's still a lot of tremendous financial pressures, though. We're still in an era where procurement departments are as involved in brands choosing agencies as the marketers are. And by the way, You know who should have the loudest voice in that? The consumers. That should really be the ones who determine whether the marketing of a brand is successful. I think we're getting there. Consumers are taking more control, taking more power. There's a lot less blind loyalty to brands. I think we have our friends and millennials to thank for really disrupting that model and making it much more about meeting my needs in the moment, giving me experiences that are a little richer and satisfy me on more than that the classic model of I have a headache, I'm going to take something for this headache, and unfortunately that's how way too much marketing has worked, is just a pill for this problem. But you see brands doing it right. You see brands understanding now that more than 80% of consumers choose brands that actually agree with them on values and issues and morals and ethics. And that's cutting both ways. So I feel like we actually are going through an emotional revolution in this business. It's just been a matter of timing and the world being ready for it. And now we actually have the capability
Yeah,
to
you're right.
understand
We
when
do have
people, even when
we
they
have
don't
that.
want to volunteer it. The vast majority of people who leave brands because they're dissatisfied, they never complain. They just leave.
Yeah,
So
there's
it was
nothing.
very easy, right, for marketers all along to say, well, nobody's complaining. No, they're just taking their business elsewhere. And I think now people are starting to understand you got to get out ahead of that. You leave everything for the moment of impulse. Well, then there's no such thing as brand equity at
Correct.
that point.
And then
Brand
everybody's on the
equity
same.
now is trust. Brand equity is built on empathy. So I'm still very hopeful for marketing and excited to be here at a time when I do see this kind of change happening.
It's the kind of attitude that we have to have going into the unknown and to new things. And I couldn't agree more that uh, technology seems to be here now. We saw that through the pandemic, and we see that through AI, and you
That's
can
right. And the
start to
gap
see that.
closed, right? Before the pandemic, we had digital customers and
That's
traditional
right.
customers. Now digital is tradition.
Yep. And the consumer knows that. And they're like, hey, I don't want a completely different. Sometimes I want to go in, sometimes I want to be here, and I actually want you to talk to each other, move through that experience, and
Right.
know that that's okay. And I
Yep.
think the consumer has that language and understanding now, but based on our what we needed to do through those times of pandemic. Crazy that would
Definitely.
bring out so much. I want to talk before we go. I want to talk about popular culture a bit because it's fun, and not
Oh
only
my
that, but
God.
it's got
Yeah.
such a long and amazing relationship
By the
with
way, lest you
with
think this
brands.
T-shirt is purely a Van Gogh thing,
I did.
it actually is a pop culture reference in
See,
itself.
and that's the mixture of low art and high art, and like my favorite. It's
Right.
just the understanding of that has always been my favorite, and it has been a uh, a fun part of being adjacent to within marketing and advertising, adjacent to popular culture, and exploring that relationship with it.
Yeah.
So I you know, a lot of what we think of pop culture, kind of modern pop culture, starts in '80s, and capitalists like us like supercharging popular culture with capitalism and money and commerce.
Sure.
So what can understanding our audiences, what do you believe through your career and now what you're doing, what can understanding our audience's relationship with pop culture, how can it make us better marketers? The things that we love inside of popular culture, and what we tend to be fans of.
Well, look, 90% of all the decisions people make are emotional. And it doesn't matter whether we're talking about consumer decisions or, what to stream tonight when you're in front of the TV, or which podcast you're going to listen listen to on your morning run. Those are all emotional decisions. We're not sitting down with spreadsheets and comparing features. So I think it's really all one thing. And I spoke earlier about how I'm much more comfortable looking at marketing through the lens of the people who buy from a brand being audiences, not consumers. I think what we're all learning from each other is that audiences have emotional needs, and we all have the same needs. We don't feel all those things to the same extent. We all want to feel confident. We all want to have fun at some point. We all want to feel a sense of freedom. We all want to feel a sense of security. We all want to feel like we're doing something good for somebody else at some point. We all want to belong. And those same emotional needs govern our decisions in all aspects of life. So I think that's what each is really learning from the other now. I mean, one of the cool things that's opening up for us is we're actually starting to get opportunities outside purely the marketing space, specifically from the world of entertainment.
Yeah.
And we have recently been hired by a company whose leader wants to be a pop culture star. So in addition to focusing on the business, we're focusing on how we can take things we know about the customers of this business to form up what an audience might want out of entertainment programming that was connected to this business. It really, when you look at it through the lens of meeting people's emotional needs and interpreting and understanding that there's always going to be, for me, everything flashes back to like movie or TV scenes, right? Animal House, angel on one shoulder, devil on the other. That moment where, do I want the thing that looks like it's going to make me feel safe, or do I want the thing that looks like it's going to make me laugh? Understanding and being able to reflect an understanding of what that person really needs to feel satisfied and feel good, that's universal. And that it has a lot of power, I think, to bring us together. So where I think, there's a great symbiosis between marketing and culture, there always has been, right? I mean, the like one of the great old tales of advertising is the only reason, of course, I'm a bald guy saying this, but the only reason we lather, rinse, repeat is because a copywriter working in-house at Procter and Gamble decided to add the word repeat on a bottle of Prel. And that doubled sales for the shampoo industry. So,
Talk about copyright.
right? Right.
Repeat.
One word, that's a pretty good word. I remember once I used to work with a copywriter, and she had a sign over her desk, and it just said, it was white type on a black background, and it just said, flushable. And I said, why is there a sign over your desk that says flushable? And she said, I wrote that. She had come up with the word flushable for a feminine protection product. But actually, that word had never been used before.
That's crazy. But we don't think of that. A lot of times we do. Culture does work in that opposite way, in that, and not always. I always tell people I don't normally go for a goal of creating culture. We draft off of it,
Right.
and we ride it, and some of us do it better than others, and some of us can do the things that are in the right now. But always things are coming and going, and we talked a little bit about this before we hit record, but nostalgia tends to be just like, I think it stopped towards the pandemic when everything went to safety and everything kind of,
Yeah.
like the messaging got a lot more simple towards things. But before that, we had Home Alone coming back. We had every Super Bowl. Everything is hitting nostalgia note over and over and over. Why is it so powerful in your experience?
Well, it tends to happen in a 20 to 30 week cycle, 20 to 30 year cycle,
Yeah.
sorry. So right now, like the 90s are back full force. We're seeing reboots of TV shows like Frasier, being the latest example.
Yeah.
Or Picard. I'm a giant Trekkie. Picard really being ultimately a reboot and ending as a true reboot of Star Trek: The Next Generation.
My TNG, that is my Star Trek, and also Picard third season guy. Hey, good, fantastic. They did it right.
That brought richness to the canon. So we see these 20 to 30 year cycles, but to bring it back to like the ultimate crossroads between advertising and popular culture, Mad Men, which such an amazing series, right? And maybe the most memorable scene from that entire series was where Don Draper was pitching the Kodak carousel, and he focused on nostalgia, and he went back to its original meaning, its derivation, which referred to the pain from an old wound. And I think these 20 to 30 year cycles, it's no coincidence that these things start to get popular as each generation starts to have children of their own and starts to long for some of the things that felt comfortable and familiar. Because look, being an adult is a lot of things, but for the most part, it is not as much fun, and it does not feel as safe as being a young child. So, when I'll sit up at night when I can't sleep, and I'll comb YouTube for old opening credits of TV series that like I used to watch on reruns from the 1960s when I was a kid, because there is an emotional comfort in the things that we associated with, I think, a safer time in our life. And that's the beauty of nostalgia. Now, I think it's also important to live in the present, but the fact that the present always makes a place of reverence for our past is one of the most beautiful aspects of life.
And interesting that I think the most interesting is things like Stranger Things and things that tend to go into like 80s and then they flipped into 90s culture, which you kind of see like that is the same as when I was growing up, what Wonder Years was doing for my parents, right? You saw that, what you even talked about, that 20 or 30, it's almost like it's pulling it along in a rope and it's just moving as we move, right?
And it also brings generations together at that point.
That's what I mean. Because Stranger Things
who just went to what they swear was going to be the last ever Kiss concert until they started talking about playing in Vegas about 2 days later. But I remember that night, Gene Simmons on stage talking about what it meant to him to see 3 generations of the same family there at the concert, where historically music has always been something that parents and kids have fought over. Kids hating their parents' music, parents hating their kids' music. But when these things can bring us together, when a generation can get together with a younger generation to watch Stranger Things, because, to my kids, that's a current, really well done TV show. But to me, it also looks like it was recorded on a VHS tape. And it's bringing back some music from the time and a lot of I had those jeans and I had that shirt and I rode those bikes. And all of that really creates cross-generational connection in a way that very few things can.
And if you can tap into that as a brand, like in an authentic way, then...
And some have.
And some have.
I think you can also really screw that up.
Correct.
But as evidenced when McDonald's about 10 years ago started to do some really awkward, creepy things with Ronald, deciding they were going to make Ronald McDonald a social media icon, and it was just like he was just super creepy. Or when one unfortunate agency choice was to bring Orville Redenbacher back from the dead as a very oddly CGI animated character. Like, sometimes nostalgia doesn't work, But when it taps into that genuine emotion, and when it reminds us of the things that we as different generations have in common, and I love your example of Stranger Things because I think they've done it brilliantly. Having just seen Wonka in the theater this weekend, and how they brought a very 1960s sense of optimism
Hmm.
to 2023 movie entertainment. Um, it's genius. That movie feels like it was made in 1968. It literally just feels like they just sat down and cranked out another movie back then. And it works. It doesn't feel old. It feels timeless. It's a subtle difference.
Yeah, and any audience can just, if you know it's going on, then it's awesome. But if you don't and you're just sitting back, you kind of understand why the optimism, why they needed it at that time, and
And
why
oh
we
my
may
gosh,
need it
do
at
we
this
need it
time.
now?
If there's any time, please bring it. And
Yeah.
so those things give me not hope. They just when you're doing a career inside of marketing, I think we spoke a lot about this, and I think this will be the theme for our talk, which is to be that, how do you become that light, and how do you keep your inspiration going? How do you keep that going through an entire career, and what leads you through that, even when things seem like they're moving slower than we may like, or there's
I've,
still
I've
some
always loved
shady
that.
areas.
I love that you put it that way, and I thank you for it because for as long as I've worked in the businesses, I've had the opportunity to mentor people. I have said many times we have the opportunity to be a light in a dark place, and that's not an opportunity we should pass up.
Yeah, I mean, it's either that, or we can curse. What is it? Curse the darkness, or
Right?
be the light. So I really appreciated our conversation. So happy we were able to kind of connect before, or now that it's 2024, I'm very happy that we were able to connect in the new year.
Yes.
And Ian, where can people find out more about you, could connect with you, and find out more about Sooth?
Well, thanks, Joe. I appreciate it. You can find me on LinkedIn. That's where I'm most active in social. So that's just my first and last name, IANBAER, 7 letters, nice and tidy. Um, or you can check out what we're doing at Sooth at our website, which is soothbetold.com. That's SOOTHBETOLD.com. You can also follow us in all the usual places: Facebook, X, and various speaking engagements and podcasts near you. Joe, this has been an absolute pleasure. I've really enjoyed the conversation, and I can't wait to do it again. Thank you.
Likewise, and I can't wait to keep seeing what's going on with Sooth. And congratulations on year one. And
Thank you.
yeah,
Happy Sooth
absolutely.
anniversary to us.
Cannot wait to keep the eye out and connect again and talk more pop culture, and maybe just dig directly into TNG for an hour or two.
Oh,
So,
yeah. As long as we make a little room for TOS. And I got to tell you, I love
oh,
Strange New Worlds.
I think Strange New World. We could go on. It's definitely, they figured it out. Like they were like,
Yep.
oh, we want an episodic. We don't need it to be a giant story. We just
And
want
such a faithful
well done.
prequel to the original series.
Well, and I will say,
This year we're getting bones. I know
yeah,
we are.
yeah, and I'm not trying to say. I just do think it is such an interesting time how we continue certain pieces licensing, and certain things can continue to go so far, and then certain pieces can't. And struggle through that. And I think
No question.
I think the more we can understand that, and why humans, why we think the way we do, and that emotional part of it will help us build brands that are as timeless. So thanks again, Ian. Take it easy,
Thank
and
you so
we'll
much, Joe.
talk to you next time.